Hi there, GrassRoots Community Network viewers. Welcome back to another of Paul and John's excellent ballot issue trips. This one's a trip. We're going to be going over the Colorado state ballot issues and some of the local issues concerning Aspen and Snowmass Village. And don't believe us. We're just kind of making stuff up as we go along, and don't believe anything you see on television. What you should do is work your way through this blue booklet you should have received in the mail from the state, and it goes over every issue, and it has for and against arguments, if there were any. Some of them get into quite a lot of detail, and it's the information you need to make an educated decision when you vote. And it's important, of course, that you do vote. It's an off presidential election, but these are the ones that really matter. The presidential elections are more exciting and everything, but really it's your local representatives that are really important to your own life, and of course ballot issues particularly directly affect how our life is here in the valley. So please vote. Please vote with some education behind your vote. And I'm here with Paul Mentor. I'm John Masters. I'm the executive director of GrassRoots, and Paul has been with us for a long time, and each election we pick his brain a bit because he is has a lot more financial knowledge and experience than certainly I do, and probably than you do. So I hope you enjoy it. It should be maybe entertaining, certainly informative, and we hope to a degree enlightening for you today. So, Paul, let's dive into. We have about 10 issues we're going to go over. The first one is Amendment D. Now, in Colorado, there's a lot of cases where you have to amend the Constitution. The Constitution of Colorado is really long, and it's been amended many, many times. And why do we have to amend the Constitution?
Well, the voters have to amend the Constitution. The Constitution cannot be changed by the legislature. So only the voters can amend the Constitution, depending on the kind of amendment it is. It's either a 55% or a simple majority vote. So this first one is related to new 23rd Judicial District judges, I think. Is that?
It's about judges.
It's about judges. So
we picked a judge.
So we picked a judge, and what you want to do is you want to have judges that will hit the ball out of the park.
Right. So far they've been they try to walk.
They try to walk judges a lot.
Yeah, but
keep them
but
out of
in
the
this
game.
case, what we're trying to do is they created a new judicial district.
Right.
On the Front Range.
Yes.
Getting crowded over there. They need more judicial districts, and they need more judges. Right now, they don't have the judges for the new judicial district, so they're going to move some over, going to walk them over to the new one, and this allows that to happen.
Right, and it gives the governor the authority to appoint those judges on an interim basis. They become the judges until they cycle into the next term, I guess, is the way it works. Because interestingly, there is not a stated process for how to do this under the Constitution. So this is creating one. And it's not clear how it would be handled in the alternative. If this is not approved, it's not clear how they would actually handle that. There are other methods, vacancy provisions, and other ways that the governor can theoretically provide judges, but none of those stipulate for a new district. So this basically creates a process to allow the governor, and it would create a replicable process. So If you're a Republican and you say, well, I don't like that Democratic governor, I don't want him moving judges over into my district. It's like, well, I get you, but if there's a Republican governor in the future, this would become the method where for the next time it happens, that governor would get to use this method as well. So I circled this one with a yes. I thought that probably made sense.
It seems like
Yeah.
it's a solution.
It's a solution
without a real downside to it.
And what happened was they basically split the 18th district into 2 districts. So these are judges that are familiar with this area already, and they've been working in this region already. And so it's not a situation where you'd be bringing judges in from the Western Slope to the Front Range or from Northern Colorado to Southern Colorado or anything like that. You're basically using the judges that are there for this.
Okay.
So
Next is Amendment E, which is to extend the homestead exemption to Gold Star spouses. And these are the spouses of veterans who were killed or injured in action. And the homestead exemption saves them on property taxes.
yes,
That's correct.
that's correct.
So it seems like we definitely don't do enough for veterans in this country, and this is a small thing I think we could do.
Relatively small thing. Statistically, there are, the state is estimating that there are 490 surviving spouses of veterans who would qualify for this. The average price of this would be about $600 a year in terms of the homestead exemption. There are some minor administrative costs associated with this as well. The total overall cost in 23-24 would be $288,000, the majority of which would be the tax revenue. It's planting, essentially. So it's kind of a logical extension of what the homestead exemption currently does, and it seems like a reasonable one to me. So,
What is the homestead exemption? Where does that come from? Do we know? It sounds like it's a very old
so it's a
law
long
from the beginning of Colorado, probably about.
It's a constitutional provision that reduces property taxes owed on a qualifying homeowner's primary residence by exempting 50% of the first $200,000 of a home's value from taxation. The legislature can adjust the $200,000 amount to either increase or decrease the homestead exemption. They haven't done that, and this is a constitutional amendment to actually expand its purpose, so it's different than increasing or decreasing the amount. That's not happening. Current qualifying homeowners include Coloradans age 65 or over who have lived in their home for at least 10 years, and veterans with a service-connected disability rated 100% permanent and total by the federal government. A qualifying veteran who is also eligible for a reduction in property taxes as a senior cannot currently claim both deductions. So what this does is this basically extends it to the families of the deceased, to the spouse of the deceased, for as long as the spouse is alive. And the current population that would qualify for that is about 490 people.
Okay, so that sounds like a good thing.
Yep.
Changes to charitable gaming operations. This enables. We've had a couple raffles at GrassRoots, and it enables you to pay the. There's a lot that go. The state requires to go take classes and be not licensed, but
Educated
and approved to run a raffle or bingo, who we're honoring behind us.
Yep.
And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to do that, to actually operate a raffle or a bingo appropriately. And so this allows, it doesn't require a nonprofit to pay somebody to do it, but it allows you to pay them the minimum wage.
Up to minimum wage.
Yeah.
I see this one as ministerial as well. I've also been involved with nonprofits that have done raffles in addition to GrassRoots, and it's a pain to manage. And this kind of streamlines the process, relaxes it a little bit. and kind of acknowledges the kind of the changes in the perspective on these kinds of activities that have happened in society over the last several decades. It doesn't change any of the underlying legal provisions about what can be, how the raffle can work and how the money can be used. The money has to continue to be dedicated to the nonprofit's purpose. So it doesn't change any of that. It just relaxes the provisions a little bit, makes it a little easier for small volunteer organizations to make it work. The net impact on the budget of the state is $20,000 is what they're estimating. So we're doing all this to change the state budget by $20,000.
Okay.
So
Okay, amending the state statutes, we have Proposition FF, healthy school meals for all.
Yes.
Paul doesn't like this one.
I don't
What's
not
wrong?
like this one.
What's wrong with free lunches? For,
You're going to really
for
subject
everyone?
every child in Colorado.
No,
to
not
that
subject. They don't
institutional
have to
food.
eat it. They don't have to have it.
But now everybody's having to pay for it.
Everyone has to pay for it, but there's kids who can't afford to pay for it.
Well, they already get meals.
And so
that's not a
So
change.
here's the thing.
This is giving free government food to people who don't need it. That's what this is.
So there is a thing.
I may go out and invest in the providers though after this, 'cause it's like the full school meal provider funding plan is what this is. This makes sure that
Look at
those
these delicious
organizations-
meals that these kids can get, though, that
Yeah.
are nutritious. And there's a issue here. There's also a thing about how, I have to pay for mine and you don't. So you're one of the poor kids. There's that stigma in the school lunchroom.
That is used as one of the pro arguments for this, that there is somehow stigma around getting a school lunch. I don't buy that argument personally. Now, I fully believe and agree with the idea of funding school lunches at a level that allows people that are means-based to be able to get them. I don't really think that this is a consistent expansion of the use of state money when there's so many other needs that are means-based, that aren't being met in the schools, that really where this money could be directed. So completely think that kids should have nutritious lunches. As a parent who raised kids through the school district, and I know you are one as well who did that about the same time I did, I saw myself as responsible to make sure that my kids were.
Yeah, we did too, pretty much.
So,
occasionally they'd have to, have to eat that stuff, but.
Well, sometimes it was fun. I mean, I liked getting my lunch when I was a kid, right? I mean, I liked paying, but my parents didn't want to pay for it, so I brown bagged it because it was actually, cheaper. So, but
and better, probably. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know if it was better. My mom was pretty good at making lunches.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying. I
And
misinterpreted it.
Parents control what their kids are eating.
Yeah.
It's
So,
brown bagging.
I mean, I just think this is kind of one of those.
There was a whole
overreaches.
swap thing going on too. Because
There was.
I had pretty good lunches, and so.
Yeah. So
it's
bartering at
bartering
the lunch table became a thing
whereas
back in the day.
if everybody gets the same thing, you can't.
That might be something that ended in the 70s. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I see this as as one of those camel's nose under the tent government things. Let's just feed everybody. And it's not a new idea. I can remember a conversation I had in the 90s with the governor at the time of the state of Washington where I lived was a guy named Mike Lowry, very liberal Democrat. And my wife and I were friends with his press secretary and her husband, who was actually also my boss at the time. And I remember her making this very argument to me. Well, if there are kids in school that aren't getting their lunches, why don't we just feed everybody? So it's not a new idea. I just feel like it's just a bridge too far. I believe it takes the use of government funds, the redistribution of government funds to the point where you're actually essentially redistributing money to people who don't need it. And so from a principle standpoint, I just think that's a bridge too far.
How much does it cost? Do we know?
So the cost on this is, well, it would be paid for with property taxes paid by families with incomes of $300,000 or more. So it's being applied to
The wealthy.
the wealthy people, wealthy income earners.
Yes.
Although, and if you own an S corporation and it flows through to your 1040, and you employ 6 people, and your business had net income of $50,000, I mean, this might apply to you. So it's not always $300,000 on your tax return doesn't necessarily mean you're super rich, but
No.
But I understand that it is designed to apply to people who are wealthier, who have decent incomes, so that it's not being it's not being paid for by lower income Coloradans. The total cost of this is estimated to be expected to increase state spending by $212,289 for administrative costs set up for the new program, and by $115.3 million in 2023-24 for school meal reimbursements and administrative costs, and by between $71.4 and $101.4 million per year starting in 24-25. So there are some startup costs that are higher to put the infrastructure in place, and then it's about between $71 and $101 million a year in additional state spending that would occur as a result of this. So if you think, just to back away from the political perspectives on the issue and the philosophy about government, if you think that it is a good idea to make sure that all kids are treated equally in schools, and it wouldn't just apply to public schools. This would apply to any certified school that has a lunch program.
The CRMS.
Yeah, it would apply to any school. Then you should vote for this. If you think that it's a bridge too far in terms of the use of government funds, then you should vote no.
Okay.
On to GG.
This is proposition. I'm sorry. Is this a proposition?
Yeah, it's proposition GG.
It's a proposition. Proposition GG, and that's to include a chart like we have here,
Right.
on the ballot and on petitions for citizen-initiated measures that change the individual income tax rate. So there aren't going to be a whole lot of these. Every once in a while, there's something like this.
Right.
So more voter information, the better.
That's what I think, and people are more and more today. People are visual learners, so having a table as well as the narrative in the ballot or in the proposition itself, I think, is helpful for people to process information and really understand the relative impact.
Well, and a lot of the reason we're doing this show is that if you go by reading ballot language to make your decision,
that can be hard sometimes.
Yeah, it can be pretty convoluted.
It can be.
And sometimes it can seem like you vote the opposite of what you really want because of the way the language is. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's GG. Sure, why not?
Yep.
Okay, the next one is Proposition 121. And here we actually have a chart. We're showing you a chart, I believe, that shows, this would be a perfect example of what the previous proposition is talking about.
It is a perfect example.
And it would be, and this shows that if the tax reduction goes through, how much money you would save, which isn't a whole lot for anybody. And I looked at, here's a great example. I looked at this and said, well, I'm going to, save whatever, $63 or something. and the state's going to lose $382 million. Seems like it's worth my $63 to let the state have $382 million. That's a pretty good leverage there for me personally. But Paul says, no, that's not what this is about.
Well, I mean, I was mistaken when we were talking off screen, because this is actually brought forward by a citizens initiative, not the legislature.
Okay.
So
That 121 is.
121
Oh,
state income tax reduction.
Oh, okay.
So this is a reduction from a flat rate of 4.55% to a flat rate of 4.4% in the state property tax rate. And it would be a perfect example of how you could have a table and you could see what the average impact was for people in all categories. And they have that in the blue book here. They have an example, and maybe we'll shoot it up.
And we have it.
Yeah,
behind it.
so we have it up here somewhere, I think.
Yes.
So you can kind of get an idea of what that would look like. The issue here is that everybody, of course, got their polis bucks this year, right? If you filed an income tax return, you got your check back for $750. Mm-hmm. That essentially is a Tabor refund, because the state collected more money than it could spend under the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which is an amendment to the Colorado Constitution. It's been there for many, many years. And the state's budget post-COVID, like a lot of government budgets are, with all the stimulus and everything that's going on, has been booming. And state spending is projected to go between the 22 and 23 fiscal year, which we're in now, and the 23-24 fiscal year, to increase from $16 to $20 billion. So it's the most significant increase in recent history as a percentage basis. And the state isn't going to be able to keep all that money. They're going to have to continue to write checks. Essentially what this is going to do, at least in the next year or two, or maybe 5, is reduce the amount of money that the state's going to be required to pay everybody back, because the state isn't going to be able to keep all the money that it gets. That's my read on what I see. Now, it is a citizen initiative. It's not from the legislature, so people should do their own research and make their own decision. But how often do you see a tax cut on the ballot? Very rarely.
Never.
So, you might want to take advantage of it while you have the opportunity, just to say you did it in your lifetime. So just a thought there. So.
Okay.
Shall we go on to the really fun one?
Sure. Let's go on to the really fun one. Okay. Access to natural psychedelic substances, and this is meaning psilocybin.
Primarily, but not exclusively.
Not exclusively. And this isn't like I think you should have home delivery, but
home delivery of psilocybin along with your alcohol
for all,
which we're gonna talk about later.
It's like
right?
School lunches and liquor delivery to your home. That's not what this is about at all.
No.
This is about right now. So psychedelic mushrooms is a controlled substance, and it will remain a controlled substance, but it will it will decriminalize the personal possession, growing, sharing, use, but not the sale of 5 natural psychedelic substances. There's this stuff became illegal back in the late 60s, I think, and everybody was, all the straights were freaking out and wanted to stop this. And not only did they stop the, use, distribution, and all that, but they stopped all the research into the potential health benefits, particularly psychological health benefits. There's been a lot of research recently by very reputable institutions that have shown that these substances are very useful in dealing with depression and anxiety, suicidal tendencies, a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And so this is enabling people over the age of 21. But there are penalties for use under the age of 21 for possessing, using, or transporting, and people over 21 allowing kids to use them.
Yes.
Yes. So, the war on drugs didn't work. Cost a lot of money.
Worked for the pharmaceutical companies.
It worked for the Mexican drug lords.
Worked for the Mexican drug cartels. Depends on who you were or are,
right,
as to whether or not it worked, right?
Right.
So,
right, and that doesn't really apply to mushrooms, but so anyway,
I find this one really interesting, and I'm torn because I'm a kind of rule follower and a structured regulations guy, as you know. And
Paul's from the Midwest.
Yeah, I am from exactly, and so, these substances have not kind of passed muster with the FDA the same way that other medications and treatments have, but then maybe that's also their advantage. That we're sitting here, post-COVID CDC, and however you feel about vaccines for COVID, I'm vaccinated. Not boosted, but I am vaccinated. I have to say, I think more people are seeing, and I'm seeing it more and more. The question being, okay, these vaccines, they were helpful and they are helpful, but at what point do the other treatments that are available, start to take over, so we don't all have to have these vaccines every 6 months? And continue to just make sure that the stockholders in Pfizer are getting paid. At some point, the relationship between the government and big business and the pharmaceutical industry is a real concern to me. And that really started big time under the Bush administration when the pharmaceutical, which was a kind of legislation that he proposed, went into place for drugs for seniors. Yeah, for drugs for seniors. So, I'm kind of torn on this one because
I think that relationship goes a lot further back than that.
It goes way further back, but it really kind of went over a tipping point. I mean, the government and the pharmaceutical industry are basically hand in hand since then. And so this I see as kind of a countermeasure to that, which I like. I worry about things like local governments being given accountability and responsibility for controlling and regulating things that they really don't have a basis for understanding. I just sense, and I'm not by no means an expert, so I'm open to being persuaded otherwise, that the understanding of how to manage and regulate these resources across the population trails the effort is behind the effort to use them. And there's an urgency to bring them forward into the marketplace, and I appreciate that. I'm just concerned about kind of this. There feels like a mismatch to me. So, am I right about that? Am I wrong about that? What do you think, John?
I don't know. I think the government doesn't need to really get involved in. Certain drugs are addictive. Certain drugs have obvious negative impact on society. Let's say alcohol, and I think that maybe we're talking about the same thing here. Is the decision-making process, and not just these things that call them recreational substances, including alcohol, nicotine,
marijuana.
Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of pills out there that people are addicted to. That are highly questionable whether they're actually even doing what they were supposed to do in the first place.
And a lot of them are prescribed.
You have to prescribe them. And I've seen a doctor I've known that went from being like, you got to really, take one of these things at a time, see if that works. If it doesn't, then we'll back off on that. And we'll try something else to just like, oh, hey, these just came in.
Yeah, try these.
Try these. We're just figuring out if this works or not, but supposedly they're safe, so here you go.
Yeah.
You know, so
that kind of exists already, is your point.
that
Kind of range or span of regulatory enforcement and philosophy about application relative to science and testing.
Yeah.
That's already out there in the marketplace, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And also so my best friends have done psilocybin. I don't know anybody's addicted to this stuff because it's not something you do that like, oh, I got to get high.
Got to have more of that.
Got to have more of
Got to
this.
have my Manhattan
more
at
of
5
this
o'clock.
stuff going on.
I need that drink.
No, just occasionally, and certainly under the studies, it has greatly helped people reduce their anxiety and to realize that all this crap that they're worried about all the time doesn't even exist. And so, this kind of substance helps people understand, kind of actually get a grip on reality and reduce their anxieties and their difficulties, and they don't become dangerous. People don't do mushrooms and go, rob a liquor store. That's not what happens.
Okay.
But it probably should be, keep an eye on it, make sure that something doesn't come up where, you shouldn't be driving motor vehicles while on mushrooms, but you shouldn't be driving motor vehicles when you've had a drink either. And a lot of countries in the world don't allow you to do that. And so anyway, sure, why not? Go Colorado.
Okay, all right, well.
Okay.
We be leaders again.
Yep, be leaders again. Okay.
Cool. All right.
Next is 123, dedicate revenue for affordable housing programs. So this sets aside current tax revenue and moves it in towards affordable housing for, really the Front Range. We have some photos here that are of course
more local,
and Aspen has been, of course, in the forefront of affordable housing in this country for decades, and so these are good examples of how nice affordable housing could be. But really, this problem is in the Front Range, where it's gotten really expensive, and I don't. You can keep building subdivisions out there and maybe put inexpensive homes in subdivisions. I don't know if that's possible anymore, but how big is that? Are we going to spread the Front Range cities to do that? And this is going to be more higher density, urban, affordable housing where it's really needed.
Right, and it divides the money. It takes existing money and it allocates it through DOLA, essentially, the Department of Local Affairs, and the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, which I found interesting, to administer 5 programs in 5 areas. They're doing grants and loans to local governments and nonprofit organizations to acquire and preserve land for affordable housing development, in other words, land banking. And there's arguments about whether land banking is a good thing or not, but it is a tactic to buy land now at a certain cost and set it aside so it's available for housing, and that way you don't have to pay the continually growing price. Assistance to develop affordable multi-family residential housing is the second program area. Equity investments in affordable housing projects, including a program to share home equity with tenants. Not exactly sure how that would work, how you're making the government your equity partner or something. I'm not sure how that would work. Home ownership programs and down payment assistance for first-time buyers. That one I like. Get people into an equity position without a long-term commitment of a governmental partner. A program addressing homelessness through rental assistance and eviction defense. A lot of people, more and more people are in danger of losing their housing. And that's happening a lot around here because as people identify as owners of rental housing, identify the highest and best use, there's a disequity between what rental costs are and what people can earn in the economy. That's a dysfunction that there might be other strategies, governmental strategies to fix as well, economic strategies that the government could incentivize. But be that as it may, that's what's going on here. And then the last one is grants to increase the capacity of local government planning departments to help them essentially to try and institutionalize expertise in local government around what it takes to design in your zoning code and your regulatory scheme a structure that allows for you to maintain local affordable housing in your community over time. So those are the areas that are intended for the money to be used here.
And of course, maybe some of this could end up in Pickens County.
Could.
But really the population's on the Front Range. And that's where
yeah.
the issue is. And
yep, on the Front Range, and it's $145 to $290 million per year, and 145 is the first year, and then it's 290 or more starting in 23-24. That's a lot of money, but housing is really expensive, so it's really not a lot of money if you think about it. So, if an average unit costs $500,000, to build on the Front Range, it's $1.4 million here now. That's at $300 million a year, that's 600 units. So, across the whole Front Range, it's not a huge amount of money. I like the fact that it's divided into different buckets so that it can be used with other programs to help leverage government participation in larger efforts to build housing that's affordable. I think that's good. And I like the fact that it's not a tax increase. The fact that it's essentially a reallocation of funding to what is
out of the general fund.
Out of the general fund. Mm-hmm. So housing is, we're really in this weird economic time right now in the world, but really in the United States and in attractive places to live like Colorado, where what constitutes home is really being redefined. I mean, what you and I grew up with, we're kind of like the post-Levittown, suburban kids, right?
Yes, I am.
In America, and I am as well. And and it's that had its, those places are still there and they're not going away. But as the future of housing, those places are not the future of housing in America. And we need to be able to provide, America economically needs to be able to provide stable housing for its population going forward.
And the house,
affordable housing.
The house my father built the year before I was born for $33,000, I think just sold for $2.8 million.
And that, to give people, where is that relative?
It's in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles.
Right.
And it's just a resident. It's just a house.
Right. Same here.
On
a tract home
on a third of an acre. I mean, that was nice, but
yep. Same here.
It's a great place, and but the fact is, he was making probably a little bit more than $33,000 a year.
Right.
So does that mean you got to make a little more than $2.8 million a year?
Right. Yeah, we've really done this to ourselves with the way we've managed our economy over the generation, right? In terms of the consumption-based economy that we have, and the way we've demanded that everybody work, and the two-income family thing, and everybody's got to have the newest everything, and all the regulations, right. and another impact has been, quite candidly, and you can argue whether this is appropriate or not. I think a lot of it is appropriate. All the environmental regulations that we put in place because of what we didn't know, destruction of wetlands and other environmental impacts that with cheap land. There have been some legitimate increases in housing because a lot of costs of housing in those days were externalized, and we didn't really realize that.
Right.
At the time.
It all went downstream to somebody else.
Right. Yep. So there's a lot of things that have affected it. I actually think this looks like a reasonable governmental proposal to try and provide another tool to use to try for communities to focus and incentivize building affordable housing for their communities. And I'm a big supporter of affordable housing. So just for those of any of my conservative friends out there who are losing their mind right now because I'm supporting this,
I was
that's
about
why.
to say we need to we need to pin this video. Paul actually is in favor of increased government spending in what is normally a private marketplace.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that analysis. Okay. Proposition 124, increase allowable liquor store locations. Okay, my first impression of all these booths, we've got 3 of them.
Good. We should probably take them
Trioca.
all at once, right? Because all 3 of them involve booze.
Yes.
The next 3 all involve booze.
Yeah, and what this does is it allows a single owner to have multiple locations under the same liquor license?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't see how that benefits anybody. I don't see the benefit of that for the general.
I actually don't like this one because it reduces competition.
So it seems like to me somebody's going to just, whoever's got the biggest wine store in the valley all of a sudden has all the big wine stores in the valley.
Right. And liquor stores are a place for better, I think for better, but because there's such high demand for booze in America, because we're all medicated, let's face it, that there are opportunities to have small businesses start and employ people and have different owners who can build equity. And I think this would work against that. And so I think it's the wrong decision at this time, maybe ever, because there's enough opportunity for, I think, entrepreneurs and solid business people who know how to run these businesses to grow their businesses and to expand and to buy out their competition. If they, I've seen it happen in Carbondale, where I lived, and we see it happen everywhere. So I don't think that this is something that is really in the interest of having a diverse local economy in local communities.
I also just sort of felt like, aren't there enough liquor stores? I mean,
there's plenty of liquor stores and there's plenty of big liquor stores.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, and, it seems like we don't have a shortage. If you need to go get a 6-pack of beer, you can do that. If you need to go get a bottle of whiskey, you can do that easily.
Easily, you can do that.
It's convenient. So anyway.
And this is a citizen initiative. So this was brought forward. This isn't through the legislature.
Yeah.
So it came forward through this citizen initiative.
Yeah. So it sounds like the big liquor store chains want to get this in.
Yep.
That's what it sounds like to me. So I don't want that one. Okay. Allow grocery. This is 125.
Yep.
Allow grocery and convenience stores to sell wine. There's another camel's nose under the tent
it is.
there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Because it's going to immediately be, then you might as well sell liquor.
So hard liquor. That's going to be the next
liquor.
thing, right? That'll be the next step. So.
And Kroger's doing fine. It doesn't need to sell wine.
They don't need to sell.
It is convenient, but usually there's a liquor store right next to the supermarket anyway.
That's right.
So you got to go over there. So does everything all have to be in the one box? Owned by a global.
It's really interesting to me because these have to be. I mean, the people that support these two initiatives, the 124, and this one, can't be the same people, because these are, you wouldn't, if you want bigger liquor stores, obviously you don't want to be competing with grocery stores, because they are, talk about well capitalized, well structured, with distribution chains and ability to get stuff cheaply and get it to wherever they need it to be, and compete with you.
And it's convenient because everybody has to go to the grocery store.
It's convenient because everybody has to go to the grocery store. You don't support that. So it's really interesting that these two are on the ballot against each other, and I just think people should vote no on both of them.
I also think we've got enough alcohol. Alcohol does enough damage.
I think, it's baked in, right? The systemic impacts of alcohol abuse in America are pretty much baked into everything we do already. There's no reason to throw any more gasoline on that fire.
Okay, all right, okay.
I think I'd agree with that.
I'm with you on that. Okay, third party.
As a drinker of alcohol,
Yeah, yes. I am too.
so
Moderate. Third party delivery of alcohol beverages. Okay, now my first impression of this is, really? Again, if you need a drink, can't you plan ahead and stop by the liquor store? Or are you so inebriated while you're driving down the streets like, oh, I forgot to go to the liquor store? Is this simply for, people that are non-ambulatory or whatever, but my mother was non-ambulatory for many years. She liked her scotch, and the caregiver would go out and when did the grocery shopping would pick it up. I didn't see what the deal was here. Then researching what kind of background we'd put up for this, it's a huge, civilized countries like Canada have home delivery. India, big deal in India. And it depends on the state or even a subregion of the state whether it's allowed in India, and there's a whole big thing going on there. I was interested in the idea that you could have a drone bring you a beer. But I wouldn't mind a drone bringing me a beer on my front porch. I don't want them bringing beer to all my neighbors, though. I just, okay. Then I saw a TV ad, and this is why television's dangerous, is that this TV ad was saying, well, no, the deal here is that this is coming out of the pandemic when large restaurants had the delivery vans and all this ability to deliver food and alcohol and mixed drinks to people, and the small restaurants couldn't do that because they didn't have. So this is third party delivery.
Right.
So it's like delivery of alcoholic beverages exists.
Yeah, it does.
And this is third party, and it's about being have your Uber driver.
Uber Eats and Uber Drinks.
Uber Drinks.
Now Uber Drinks.
So that made me realize, okay, so there's this disparity between the big and wealthy restaurants or restaurant chains and the small mom and pop restaurant that doesn't have a delivery service.
Yeah.
And so it's an unfair advantage. So I don't know.
Well, it's kind of this all comes out of COVID too, right? Because this delivery of everything became a big thing in COVID, and people realized there's money to be made in delivering.
Yeah.
And so this is just kind of harmonizing. I see it as harmonizing the delivery of alcohol across that spectrum of home delivery services. Now, there's clearly money to be made. It'll clearly increase the amount of activity. But if you get delivery of your groceries now, if you decided that's what you're going to do now, you're not going to go and you've got that worked out with your grocery store, why not get your 6-pack too?
Right.
So
I don't know which way I feel about this now.
I'm kind of ambivalent about it because I think, like you, it's like this is definitely a first world problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Although they do it in India, so maybe it's a second world problem.
Maybe it's a second world problem too, but it's not the biggest thing, not the most important thing in the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, and is
so maybe you should vote no on it because it's just not that important.
Yeah. I don't know. Is this happening? It is happening. I don't know. It's happening in other states.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. It just seems like alcohol. Maybe it's this triumvirate of alcohol issues makes me really realize, like, is this progressive? Is this really the direction we want to go?
Yeah. Yep. and there is, to your point, there is some delivery already, but this would basically remove all the restrictions.
And it would make it fair for everyone.
make it fair,
And
so.
I get that.
So,
Okay. Okay, now we actually do have some local ballot issues, which we're just going to, I missed this, and of course there's a very important, and we're going to talk City of Aspen first, the short-term rental tax. And this is a 10% tax on the amount charged for a nightly room for VRBO, Airbnb, that sort of thing, for short-term rentals. It's become a major issue.
it's a huge deal. Huge local deal.
Particularly in communities like Aspen. And there's people that are able to own their own home and live in Aspen because they can rent out a room or the garage or the entire home while they're somewhere else, and that's a good thing for locals who can actually still live here. I mean, I've been here long enough to remember when I had friends who lived in the west end of Aspen. They're all gone.
Yeah.
Nobody lives in the west end of Aspen.
I don't know that nobody lives.
Handful of people live in the west end of Aspen year round.
Well, they live over there because they complain about the power plant road issue. So,
Well, true.
so there are people that live there,
Okay.
but or at least part of the year. At least part of the year.
I mean,
I think there's a lot of folks that live there half the year and then
Yeah.
live somewhere else half the year.
I mean, we're coming up on Halloween here, and it used to be the west end of Aspen was the
place to go.
the greatest trick-or-treat place on the planet, and now there's zero
Yeah.
trick-or-treaters. So that's a
It's like
measure.
a leading indicator of community, effervescence, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then you start renting it out so everything's for rent. Anyway, should we tax that and take that money to put into affordable housing?
Mostly affordable housing. So is it all affordable housing?
It is, I think it's 60% of the revenue?
60% of the revenue is for
70% of the revenue.
70% of the affordable housing. What's the other 30%?
Doesn't say, it goes in the general fund.
Goes to the general fund. So, my take on this is clearly all governments need to regulate short-term rentals in their communities. It's another emergent trend that came out of COVID, right? People renting their homes, the VRBO kind of impact. It's not just VRBO, but all the services that allow people to put their homes out for rent. When we lived in RVR in Carbondale, I would walk out the door and I'd wonder, who's going to come out the door of the house across from me today? Because I had neighbors that rented their houses on VRBO before that community put its regulations in place around the issue. It's a real issue, requires regulation, goes to the larger question of how do we define home in America again, right? And we're in this transitional
community.
period. And how do we define community? And so all those issues are happening now. So it's legitimate to have a short-term rental tax, to regulate that issue, and to address its impacts. The city of Aspen has decided that one of the impacts that it has is that it reduces the amount of housing that's available for locals. I'm sure there's a correlation there. I'm not sure what that level is. But they've set a level that they've calibrated financially to help fund what they see as a gap in developing new affordable housing. And so it's hard to disconnect this issue from the Lumberyard project, which is a very large, significant housing project, and other development plans to add units. And so really, if you're a voter in Aspen, you should be really paying close attention to this. And if you agree with the city's strategy to build new units like the Lumberyard project, then you should vote for this because that's what this is funding. If you think that that's the wrong approach, then you should probably vote against this to send the message that even if you agree with affordable housing, that maybe they're not taking the right path in terms of trying to meet their future demand and how they're trying to provide those units. They're by building new and not maybe addressing some of the efficiency issues within the existing system and the effectiveness issues within the existing system first. That'd be my statement for.
I think on a market level, a 10% increase universally across everyone that's renting out houses or rooms or whatever in Aspen, it's not going to make any difference. People are going to come in and pay the 10% anyway, and it's equal and all that.
It's also probably a more stable annual, not more stable, though that's the wrong term, probably a less volatile source of funding than the real estate transfer tax. Because the real estate transfer tax, which is the biggest and most significant source of funding for affordable housing in Aspen, while it's a large amount of money, it's also very volatile because it cycles with the purchase and sale of private free market real estate, and it's got a standard deviation of 0.4, which means in any one year it can vary by 40% on average. And so sales tax can be volatile as well, but it's not nearly that volatile. So it adds a sales tax, and there's a small sales tax that is also used for affordable housing in Aspen currently. Another sales-related tax, which is essentially what this is basically a sales tax, would add some stability to that revenue stream as well, at whatever level they put it in.
It also seems like, I got to say, I'm an Airbnb VRBO guy.
I am too.
That's when we go on vacation, unless it's a one-nighter.
Absolutely.
We'll stay in a hotel then, but otherwise, we love it. It's fantastic, and you get to go live in the community,
Yeah.
it's much more interesting spaces to vacation in than a hotel or a resort. And so I'm all for it, but I don't know. I'm beginning to feel like, well, I don't want that happening in my neighborhood.
Well, that's the thing, right? In a place like Aspen, where there's, in Wichita, Kansas, the demand for VRBOs is going to be more relative to the overall economy, right? In Aspen, it's like everything else in Aspen. There is never going to be enough supply to meet the demand for what people want in Aspen. And that's going to be the case with short-term rentals. And that's the conundrum that the city has in dealing with this emergent issue. And it's not, it's resort communities all over the country. We go to Key West every year. We just got back from our annual trip to Key West. Same thing going on down in Key West. All these communities, all these resort communities that are also communities, which is why people like them.
Well, are they communities still? That's the real question. And is this another nail in the coffin of the concept of community?
Well, it's changing, right? When we go to Key West, we've got several friends that we make that live there full time that we make arrangements in advance to go see. We have dinner. We house sat for some friends this last time we were down there, and so we see ourselves as being loyal. I wouldn't call myself a member of the Key West community, but we're loyal visitors to the Key West community, and we really support what's good for the community. So that's one of the things that I think can be good about short-term rentals in a community, is that you're actually introducing people to what your community is all about. Mm-hmm. And that's a piece that I think has been missing in Aspen so far. I don't think they really, I think, and maybe understandably, that the Aspen leadership and even people in Aspen overall see it as another kind of invasion on the community. And I understand that, I get it. But correctly managed over time, I think that it's going to have to become part of who you are as a community, because there's no going back.
So I think go ahead and tax it and put the money into affordable housing and try to keep the real community
going.
I think whatever it takes to keep that, and it's sort of almost a sin tax in a way. It's like, well, if you're going to use the community to make money, then you should pay a tax on it to help sustain the community. So that's just my 10 cents.
Okay.
City of Aspen extension of existing. This is ballot issue 2B, and again, this is only people who live in the city of Aspen. Yes.
Correct.
Who are registered to vote in the city of Aspen. Extension of the existing 0.5% sales tax for parks and open space. It's just an extension of the existing tax, not an increase. And certainly parks and open space are really wonderful in Aspen
They are.
and an important attribute of the community.
Right. And I don't think that the question of extending a sales tax for parks and open space is really anything that anybody should oppose. The question is whether you still need a full 0.5%. I know Mike Maple has done some analysis on this. Mike Maple is a longtime local, lived in Aspen for a long time, pays a lot of attention to these kinds of issues. And there's a lot of money in the sales tax fund currently. I don't know exactly how much, but millions of dollars. And most of the acquisitions, all the acquisitions really that are able to be made, have been made. And so now you're really managing a maturing system. And do you need that same level of tax?
Can't mow the lawn anymore, any more than you're already mowing.
Can't mow the lawn anymore, you're already mowing. But I mean, there's, and there really hasn't been a lot of analysis done by the city to determine whether 0.5% is really the right amount. They're just bringing forward a renewal. So my suggestion would be to Aspen voters would be to look at that issue and see if you think that it's the right amount for an increase.
It's not an increase.
Oh, excuse me, right amount for a renewal. Thank you. It's not an increase. It is a continuation of an existing tax. Would not increase the tax rate if it stayed the same.
Town of Snowmass Village ballot issue 2C is without imposing any new tax. So Paul's for it already. Expand the permissible uses of the existing lodging tax and really the marketing special events tax
Right.
that exists already and divert some of that money into affordable housing.
Yeah. And, I really like when governments look at their tax structure and they figure out ways to allocate existing taxes to higher priority needs. And that's kind of what this is. This looks to me like Town of Snowmass Village saying, we have this need, we have this existing tax, it's better used, this part of it is better used over here than over here. And so the question for voters really is, do you agree with whether that it's a better use, and do you agree with the town's strategy for how they're going to use that money to meet those housing needs? If you do, then you should vote for this. If you don't, then you should vote against it and engage about how you think that those dollars could be used.
So you're taking money away from marketing and special events
Yep.
and moving it into housing for the people who run the
Right.
special events and make the community work for the visitors that are coming.
Right.
Seems reasonable.
It does seem reasonable to me as well.
Okay. Aspen Ambulance District, ballot issue 6A, and this is the Aspen Ambulance District, which is from Aspen to Woody Creek, but not Snowmass Village. And they're asking, actually, basically almost double the mill levy, and it'll increase their revenue, the ambulance district revenue, by $2.5 million a year. And it'll increase the property tax within the district.
Right.
Okay, so if you live within that district and you own property, your taxes will go up the way I'm reading it, sustain the ambulance district. They've become much more than, back in the old days, the jailer was also the ambulance driver, and so when the ambulance was needed, he'd have to just
Lock up the jail.
lock up the jail and everybody be cool, I'll be right back, and jump in the ambulance and go, So things have changed since then.
Things have changed. It's a growing area. it's a dirty word, but the Aspen area is urbanizing, and there's a lot more issues. There's a lot more calls, I'm sure. They're more complex, and I think we were talking off camera. Their services are expanding. They're providing a lot more educational services as well as just response, and they obviously need to house employees as well and pay employees as well, and it's getting more and more expensive to do that. So, if you want that ambulance to show up, you don't really ever want the ambulance to show up at your door, but when it needs to show up, you really want it to show up at your door rapidly.
And particularly if you're a property owner within the Aspen Ambulance District, do you want to be cheap and not pay the tax and then not have the ambulance show up?
Yeah.
If you got the money to live in the district, then you probably have the money to support the ambulance for the rest of your neighbors and the community.
Well, I would hope so. And this is one of those things from a government policy standpoint, a tax policy, that I've never really understood. If there's one thing that you want, like at the cornerstone of your funding that is always funded, it would be emergency services. And here we are voting on this as if it's a discretionary item. I mean, this is like the first thing that government should fund from the first dollar of property tax that they get. It's not just here, it happens everywhere. So it's just my riff on government tax policy and how upside down it can be.
Okay, and that's it, except for, actually, I'm just going to throw this in, the Crystal Oaks Metropolitan District. This is my neighborhood. There's about 40 of us that live up the Crystal, and we've got an old bridge and some dirt roads, and we need to ultimately replace that bridge. And so you need to create a metropolitan district that can, the main thing is it can, we can then go bond to replace the bridge, and then we'll have consistent maintenance of our roads.
Isn't that bridge like made out of logs from like 1910 or something?
It's not that. It's been. We keep fixing it and replacing pieces, so it's not made out of logs anymore.
Is the road going to be graded regularly if this
passes? Yes. Paul's been on my road, and it's, we live on the side of a mountain, and the mountain wants to eliminate those roads as quickly as it possibly can. So it takes constant maintenance, and so yes, we'll grade the roads, and so, and also what I love about this is this is as local as government gets.
Absolutely.
We'll have our own council made of people that live, our neighbors, and we'll decide, make decisions based on what really affects us, which is, getting to our houses.
Getting across the river.
You
got to have a bridge. You got to cross that river. It's going to be hard. You're going to need to.
Yeah.
So you're going to need a Jeep with a snorkel.
Yeah. So that's kind of fun. I hope it passes. All right.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, John. This was fun again.
It's been fun again. I hope if anyone's still watching on TV or on the internet, again, don't believe what we told you. Don't believe anything else you
go read.
Saw on TV. And as far as the internet goes, the television's,
just check your Instagram feed, see what they say about it.
Television's the Bible compared to the internet. So don't believe anything. Do your own research. Get several points of view and try to make your own intelligent decision. And please vote. The ballots are out. You should have received one by now. Mail it in, or drop it off, or vote on election day. Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
So long.
Bye-bye.